Wrong Jesus movie? So Son of God is directed by Christopher Spencer and stars Diogo Morgado as Jesus, Darwin Shaw, I believe, as Simon Peter, Sebastian Knapp as John, and Greg Hicks as Pontius Pilate. And Son of God, as the title says, is pretty much the story of Jesus. And from it doesn't really cover his birth and infancy and stuff. It really starts from when he is beginning to convert people. So it's from there up to his passion, death, and resurrection. Now, I really have to make an important note. When you approach religious films, it is my firm belief that you put the film before the religion. So, even if you're Christian, if you're atheist, whatever belief you follow, whenever you approach a religious film, leave your belief out of it. Seriously, just take this as a movie. Like, this is not a political thing. Like, just because you watch a movie like this doesn't make a political statement about anything. Like, watch this as a movie because I'm seriously annoyed by people who enter a movie ready to hate it just because they don't agree with it, like their views don't agree with it. And I'm also annoyed by the people who feel like, oh, I'm going to love this movie just because, your belief does match up to it. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, Son of God really is kind of like a spin off of this series called The Bible, this mini series that aired on the History Channel, and it pretty much takes footage from like the last 4 episodes or something. And ultimately, that's a very bad idea. Not just for a movie like this, like for any TV show kind of going into transition to the big screen, it's kind of a bad idea to just kind of translate scenes. And it was a bad idea and it was unfortunately executed very poorly, in my opinion. It is a very reverent movie to its subject matter, but it just doesn't do it well. Now, first of all, a big difference between TV and movies. It's one that you don't really notice when you watch each medium like by itself, but when you start putting them side by side, you do notice that visual effects really aren't up to par. And here in Son of God, you really have these big sweeping shots of like Jerusalem and the ocean and stuff, and it really just doesn't look good, unfortunately. But what I'm more disappointed by is that these scenes are not necessary. I mean, the use of CGI is not necessary. There are better ways to do it using just practical effects, and I really didn't think that this movie needed to approach this subject matter in such an epic scale. Like, for me, it should have been more personal. And I'm going to be talking about just a lot of bad stuff about this movie, but in my opinion, the absolute worst thing was the editing, because the editing completely lacked continuity. You know those supercuts on YouTube that, like let's say tribute to Breaking Bad or something, and they'll just kind of put in lots of scenes. I'm not saying those videos are bad, like they are videos, they're tributes, so they're good for that. But if you make a movie like that, it just does not work because you need to follow a story and there's no story. So really, you just have like lots of weird, jarring shots of just like, just things following each other. But even if that pace is kind of weird, like at the same time, it's just way too long and it's way too slow also, because literally half this movie, and this movie is like 2 hours 20 minutes, half this movie is dedicated to like Jesus going around teaching stuff. And that in itself is, there's wisdom to be found there, but the way they put it together is just so disorienting, and like there's no flow to anything at all. I mean, this is a complete misuse, in my opinion, of the first moments of a movie. First moments of a movie should, for me, should be introducing characters and stuff, and no one gets a good introduction here. By the end of the movie, you're not sure who half these people were, and not even Jesus gets a good introduction. He just kind of shows up and eh. Also, this movie has a really weird use of flashbacks, because sometimes they're talking about the previous scene and they feel the need to kind of spoon feed the viewer and show you the previous scene, but they don't just show it. They use this weird like after effect where it's all black and white or sepia or whatever, and it's all mystical. In terms of the score by Hans Zimmer, my problem sometimes with Hans Zimmer is that his scores can be a bit too imposing and just a bit too much, and here it really is too much. Like, his score is everywhere in this movie, and it just adds too much melodrama to every single tiny moment. And in terms of the writing here, there's just way too much plot without any focus. Because again, the scope of this story is pretty big, and I'm not saying you can't approach a scope like that, but there's a way to handle it better, because you do need to have a focus all throughout the thing. You can't just put like lots of scenes to make it look big. But the focus they were trying to maintain here, I think, was about Jesus and his teachings, but that the like normal viewer will alienate them because the target audience here is obviously Christians, like hardcore religious Christians. And in terms of being a movie, I don't think you can do that. You can't aim it at just this one group of people. You really have to try and capture everyone, well, as much as possible at least. And I actually found myself enjoying the political parts more with the romance and stuff, but there still wasn't enough of that, and I would have liked to see this movie kind of placed in a real world context. And with the characters, like, they're all pretty much stereotyped. Like, I'm waiting for the day when someone actually portrays Jesus as a flesh and blood human being, because I've taken like one theology class and I've really enjoyed it because it's really interesting to me. And my opinion of Jesus, at least, is that you know you have to kind of represent him both as divine and as human, obviously. So, and but all these movies and stuff like portraying him as just divine. Like, I don't get the human side, and that's the part we should connect with. And with the dialogue, it's just quote after quote, really. Especially when Jesus is going around, it's really, he's just a vessel in which to, kind of quote things from the Bible. And like, I really, really don't like that, because I think if you're making a movie, you have to write your own dialogue. And four people wrote this movie apparently. Don't see it at all. And in terms of the direction from Christopher Spencer, I think he just tries a bit too hard to make this feel like an epic story, when I really, really honestly think it should have been a personal thing. It's in the intimacy where I think the message that Jesus is trying to send, like whether you agree with him or not, like he really was trying to revolutionize faith at that point. And I think it was very much an intimate thing, because like way back then you didn't have, like, it was much smaller than I think we imagine it to be. And when you approach a movie like this as really taking scenes from a mini series, you have to kind of curate that well. You have to arrange scenes well. And if you directed the whole thing, like, I'm not really sure how that worked in the mini series, if Christopher Spencer directed everything or just kind of put things together. But either way, you kind of have to put things in there to make us feel like it's a cohesive whole. And again, like I mentioned before, I think you really needed to approach this in a universal way. You can't just say, "Oh, this is a movie for Christians. No one else can watch this," because that's pretty selfish. And for me, like, the best thing you can do with religious film is try to make it accessible to everyone, so they can accept that religion without all these haters going, "Oh, I don't believe it. It just feels like a bunch of miracles happening. It's magic." And honestly, that's what it felt like. Like, honestly, and I really wish it wasn't like that. I'm not gonna say this film is outright complete garbage or anything, because there were good things about it. I mean, I have to admit that the look of the film is good, especially I think the makeup people and the costume designers, they really did their jobs well. And in terms of like the passion scenes, like from the point when Jesus is on trial and when he gets up to when he gets crucified, like on a purely cinematic sense, that lends itself well to cinema, because it is very dramatic, it's very wordless, and it's just plight of a man. And those scenes did get marginally better, but it still had that weird jagged editing. So overall, Son of God is unfortunately still a pretty bad movie. I guess this really just goes to show people that don't translate TV shows to you know to movies and stuff. Like, if you're gonna do that, shoot new footage. Do what Star Trek has been doing forever. Even shows as good as, let's say, like The Wire, The Sopranos. If you're gonna turn those into movies, don't take footage from the series. Like, really exert the effort to shoot something new. But again, just because I say this movie is bad does not give anyone the right to attack this religion. Don't say that, "Oh, Son of God's bad because the subject matter is bad." That's stupid. It's like saying I don't like Braveheart because I don't agree with William Wallace. Leave your views out of this, please. It's a movie. Anyway, that is my review of Son of God. Have you guys seen it? What do you think of it? Whether you loved it or hated it? Tell me what you loved about it, or what you hated about it. But whatever you think, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.